our head coach of our local football program, Bronco Mental.
The details themselves with the right preparation can separate you from mediocre competitors that don't do that. And so, yeah, the attention to detail, I think, drives the execution, or should I say brings the execution to life, especially in critical moments.
Good evening and welcome to the Pit Press Live Road to the Pit, a show in which my son and I, who I'll introduce in a minute, try to highlight athletes and coaches throughout the state. And I'll introduce our special guest in just a second. Before I do that, I want to introduce my co-host, my son, Nick Nunez, play-by-play announcer for ProView Networks and also producer. Nick, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Dad. Happy to be on tonight on the Pit Press Live and excited to speak to our special guest, Volcano Vista quarterback Ilijah Hansen. So ready to get into it.
Well, without any further ado, and if you like our show, please subscribe to the channel. You can also follow us on YouTube and Instagram. Our very special guest tonight is Ilijah Hansen, the starting quarterback for the Volcano Vista Hawks. Volcano Vista is 5-1, currently tied for first in District 1-6A, ranked number 4 in the latest NMOT coaches poll out this week. Hawks are on a 5-game win streak. They defeated Piedra Vista 48-7 on Saturday, and Ilijah so far has some very impressive numbers through the first half of the season. 887 passing yards, 9 passing touchdowns, completing over 50% of his passes. Also has 194 rushing yards on the season and 3 passing touchdowns. Ilijah, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you guys for having me.
You know, I had a chance to talk a little bit to your coach, Chad Wallen, who's been at Volcano Vista. A lot of respect for Coach Wallen, and I'll read a quote from him a little bit later about what he thinks about your abilities. But Ilijah, Volcano Vista's won 5 games in a row, and you've been very impressive in doing so. Farmington tomorrow night at Community Stadium, and they're coming off a shutout by the hands of Cleveland. They'll be ready. They're a good team. They've got a good program there. But you beat Las Cruces 27-24, Sandia 28-6, West Mesa, a very improved West Mesa team 35-7, El Dorado 28-8, and Piedra Vista 48-7. You had your best game of the season against Piedra Vista, 18 of 21 for 258 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and you also added a rushing touchdown. Against Piedra Vista, what clicked for you on your offense? How was your team able to put up your highest point total of the season?
A big part of that win was throughout the week we bonded a lot more. A lot of effort was put in throughout the week. 3 or 4 great practices. Our game plan really helped us, and the film we watched together as a team really, really helped.
You know what? You mentioned bonding, and I cover football for ProView Networks. I'm also the voice out at Western New Mexico and cover their football and all their sports out there. But when you mention bonding in football, everyone's got to be doing their job, right? On every snap, the left guard, the left tackle, everybody's got to be in sync. And sometimes when that isn't happening, you get sloppy play. So when you're talking about bonding and you're watching film, Coach Wallen is an outstanding coach, one of the best in the state. There's no doubt about it. What do you mean by that? Because a lot of people are going to ask you, bonded, is the bond different get tomorrow against Farmington? In other words, when your things aren't going right, do you bond a little bit more? People are going to want to know that. What do you mean by that?
I think our chemistry kind of clicked and everything went our way throughout the week, and that showed in the game.
That always helps a lot, I think. What plays stuck out to you against Piedra Vista? Is there a couple of plays that you look back on? Any athlete, I played basketball in high school, so did my son, and I think when I get home, I think about plays that were good, and then some that I was like, man, that should have made that some other plays, and you run it back in your mind, I think. Was there any plays that stuck out to you?
Yeah, that first play where I threw that pick, it was a huge play that still goes through my mind. And then that 69-yard touchdown I threw to Devin Duncan. The
pick, was it not reading the coverage or you make mistakes at the quarterback position. You're completing 50% of your passes. So when you say the pick, was it something you didn't read or what was it?
Yeah, I threw the wrong route basically. It was
Go ahead.
It was supposed to be a 5 and in, and I threw a 10-yard dig.
Okay, and sometimes I see that happen at Western, where the quarterback and receiver sometimes aren't on the same page. But you learn, right, by watching film. You go over it, and then you and your wide receiver talk about it. I'm sure. Who did you throw the 3 touchdown passes to?
I threw 2 of them to Devin Duncan, and then the last one was to my running back Mason.
Tomorrow night, are you at Community Stadium? You're playing at Community Stadium, right? Or is it at Farmington?
No, it's at Community.
Okay, so how do you as a quarterback, you're the leader of the team, man. You're the leader of the offense. There's everybody who's the quarterback of the team, people are going to want to know, right? So how is it, you mentioned bonding, how is it you make sure your team is ready to play?
I always make sure they're locked in and mentally prepared for the game.
You have a certain way of doing that. I mean, you don't sound like a rah-rah guy. That's okay. Everybody's different, right? Everybody has their own way of leading. You have a certain way that you're making sure. You have a certain way you guys, go eat together. Like you mentioned bonding. Is there a certain way you guys bond together?
Yeah, we go out and eat together a bit of the time. We text a lot, always communicating, always seeing what they're up to.
Yeah, that's part of the leader for sure. Nick, go ahead.
So, Ilijah, I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of what I think was the turning point of your season, and that was your second game of the season against Las Cruces. You guys defeated the Las Cruces Bulldogs in week 2, 27-24. Your guys' offense had been shut out through 5.5 quarters. In week 1, you guys played La Cueva. You lost 21-0. You only got through about 2.5 quarters in that game. It was called because of weather. Then you start out the first half against Las Cruces. Your only touchdown in the first half was a defensive touchdown. And in the second half, you guys just explode. Freshman tailback D'Angelo Mitchell, 2 rushing touchdowns. You throw the game-winning touchdown to your favorite receiver, Devin Duncan, a 24-yard bootleg pass. What was it in that Las Cruces game that just clicked for your offense?
In the locker room at halftime, we got screamed at a little bit, kind of got put in check. And we came out and we just handled business.
Yeah. And, I don't know if you can share what the coaching staff said to you guys or not. That's probably something you want to keep in-house. But talk to us a little bit about how, and we're planning on talking to you about this a little later, but you guys have such a balanced offensive attack. You got a strong ground game, right? I think I looked at, your pass to run ratio. It's pretty even. You guys have about 2,000 yards of total offense, close to 2,000 yards of total offense on the season. It's split almost right down the middle, running and passing the ball. So talk to us a little bit about what it was like in that game to get 2 rushing touchdowns from D'Angelo Mitchell and then to throw the game-winning touchdown to Devin Duncan. Talk to us about this balanced offensive attack you guys got.
It was huge by D'Angelo to score those 2 touchdowns. I think that really changed the mindset of the game and all that. And then that touchdown I threw to Devin was just amazing, perfect.
So Ilijah, I also do games for ProView Networks. I had your guys' game against El Dorado a couple weeks ago. And I got to say, man, you execute that bootleg pretty well. It's set up really well. Coach Chad Wallen has a fantastic offensive scheme for you guys. You guys go run heavy. And it's not just D'Angelo Mitchell. You mentioned you threw a touchdown to your senior running back, your teammate Mason Goudelet, who's been huge for this offense. He's got almost 350 yards rushing on the season, a couple rushing touchdowns. But you guys really set up that bootleg really well with the run. Talk to us a little bit about those runs on first and second down for this team that have just been huge to kind of set up some of those big passing plays.
So throughout practice, throughout the weeks, we do a lot of situational drills and really practice those first down plays, those second down plays to get us into a manageable down and distance. So when we doing that a lot in practice, it really helps perfect it in game.
Yeah, and Ilijah, another thing that stuck out to me when I saw you guys against El Dorado, you guys come out of a lot of different formations on the offensive side of the ball, man. There's times where I saw you line up under center, and then you guys have like a big package where it's one of your defensive linemen. I forget his last name. I think his first name is Alvin, and he's number 92. What's his last name?
Gomez.
Alvin Gomez. Yeah, you have 2 fullbacks, and you'll have a tailback in the back, whether it's D'Angelo Mitchell or Mason Goudelet. You line up under center, and man, just to have that big offensive line, we'll talk to you about those guys in a little bit, and to have Alvin Gomez from the defensive line and to have either Mason Goudelet or D'Angelo Mitchell in the backfield running behind those guys, it's been successful for you guys so far this season. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Oh, it's just easy down in down power football. We practice that a lot too. That's our very red zone offense.
Yeah. And then talk to us a little bit about the no huddle, Ilijah. You guys can go tempo or you guys can slow it down. But what is your approach as the quarterback? How do you get everybody on the same page, get the play call in from the sideline, and get that snap ready to go right away? What's your process for that?
A lot of it is our offensive coordinator. He makes sure to make it seem like we're going fast when really we're doing it at our pace. And that really helps us be very explosive.
For sure. Dad, I'll turn it to you.
You know what's up, Ilijah? Nick, good observations there about jumbo packages. A lot of people are going jumbo, and I think Coach Wallen, as you mentioned, is very, the offensive coordinator that you have over there, Ilijah, is very creative in using those packages. And I think at the quarterback position, you have to make sure everybody's lined up, get the signals, and call the plays and audible if you have to, and change plays. You got 25 seconds to get the play. Is it 40 or 25?
40, I believe.
40. Okay, so you've got time, but there's a lot of things going on at the line of scrimmage, and I think my son was very observed that and observed it well. I wanted to read a quote from Coach Wallen about you, and again, I've got all the respect in the world for Coach Wallen. He's a good man. He gave me talked to me this morning a little bit, and Ilijah's grown so much in our program. Don't have many quarterbacks started at 17 games for the Hawks. Super proud of the confidence he's developed in running our offense and being a leader on our team. So I think that's good stuff from Coach Wallen. And again, everyone's a different leader. I can kind of tell you're more of a quiet guy, and but still playing quarterback, man. That's and then you got your studies, which you're a 3.0 GPA, and you got to study and go to school, and there's duties at home, so you've got your plate full. We wanted to talk about you as a dual quarterback threat. Through 6 games, you have 887 yards passing. Last 3 games have been big. West Mesa, I've got a lot of respect for Coach Brody and the job he does out there. He's doing a good job, and they've got, I think, two of the best cornerbacks in Sargents and Thompson. They've got some very good cornerbacks out there, and I call it almost a no-fly zone. Those guys can play tough man-to-man. But against West Mesa, you had 241 yards passing and 2 passing touchdowns. El Dorado, 156 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns. Piedra Vista, 258 yards passing with 3 TDs, 194 yards rushing. You scored a rushing touchdown in your last 2 games. From your junior year, 1,318 yards passing, 16 passing touchdowns, so only 6 interceptions. Best game of the last year was versus Versibula, accounted for 7 total touchdowns, 264 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 72 yards rushing, and 3 TDs. Your numbers show, like my son mentioned, that RPO package is pretty darn good, man. And you got to know when to run and when to pull it out and go. You got to read that. That's your read. That's why they call it RPO. How does that open things up on your offense by you being that dual threat?
It opens a lot. It shows that I can run. I can also throw the ball, or I can just give it to my running back, and not a lot of defenses could stop that.
Got to make you up. You got some threats. And those other guys you have with you are threats. They can play in space. They make guys miss. So the defense has to be very conscious of that. You execute the bootleg as bad as well as any high school quarterback. Is that something that you've really practiced on and worked over time? Is that something you've really worked on?
Yes, sir. I've worked a lot of that the last 4 years, and finally perfected it this last season.
A lot of things there. Yeah, a lot of things happening. Again, defensive end crashing on you, and a lot of decisions you have to make on the run there. A lot of these questions, by the way, and stats courtesy of my research son, who's also an attorney, man, and researches till the cows come home. So I got to give him his credit. Good job, son. How far can you throw the football on the run?
Ooh, on the run, I believe a 45, 50-yard ball.
You know what? Again, that's probably rolling right, rolling left is a little hard if you're a right-hander, and throwing across your body. So rolling right, sprint packages, I'm sure they've got those for you, rollouts, the whole thing. It says here you started playing quarterback in 6th grade.
Yes, sir. I was a wide receiver and a tight end before that, and then my team needed a quarterback, so I stepped up and played it ever since.
I bet that's a big step, man. And when you started playing that, did you fall in love with that position the way you did when you were a wide receiver? A quarterback's a way different thing. You got the ball in your hands, you're touching it every single play. So what was your approach to that?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a quarterback, but teams, you go into teams and some teams already have it. So always learned how to play it, and I've always loved that position.
I'll tell you what, Coach Wallen talks highly of you, and he's had some Diego Pavia, man. We'll get to him in a minute, but he's had some good quarterbacks out there. And anytime Coach Wallen says he talks highly about a player, you pay attention, man. That guy knows what he's talking about. You've got Farmington left, Rio Rancho, Cleveland, and then Cibola. That's some tough. One game at a time, right? One game at a time. Farmington tomorrow night, then you'll take care of Rio Rancho, Cleveland, and Cibola. But those Rio Rancho and Cleveland games and Cibola too are always circled. Those are rivals, man. Those are rivals. Those are district rivals, and they're very close in proximity as far as schools and location. Go ahead, Nick.
Elijah wanted to read off some of those team stats that we were talking about earlier that illustrates how balanced your offense really is. Through 6 games, your rushing statistics as a team, 193 rushing attempts for 917 rushing yards. That's 4.8 yards per carry, 13 total rushing touchdowns. Passing statistics as a team, you guys are 58 of 103, 903 passing yards, 10 total touchdowns. And, Elijah, obviously the spotlight is on you. You're the quarterback, but we got to show some love to your teammates on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. A couple of the playmakers we mentioned. Mason Goudelet, 346 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He's kind of that every down workhorse back. And then the freshman, D'Angelo Mitchell, an impressive 7 rushing touchdowns on the season. So talk to us about these new running backs, because last year, you guys obviously had the A-train, Elijah Gonzalez, 1,700 plus rushing yards, 17 rushing touchdowns. Mason Goudelet and D'Angelo Mitchell had big shoes to fill, but they filled them pretty well through 6 games. Talk to us a little bit about those guys.
Mason, I played with Mason since I was a little kid, so me and his chemistry have been very, very good. And he's kind of been that really good running back that could really fill the shoes of Ilijah. And then D'Angelo, he can just run the ball. He runs it very, very mean. And that's how we average our 8 yards a carry.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit about Mason Goudelet's ability to catch the ball in the backfield, man, because you mentioned you just threw a passing touchdown to him last week against Pedro Vista. That's one thing I observed when I had your guys' game against El Dorado. He did a really good job of, being able to catch those passes when you got to check it down when nothing's open downfield. So talk to us a little bit about his ability as a pass catcher.
Oh yeah, he does it very well. When we were kids, he was a big wide receiver, and then slimmed down and bulked up to a running back. So he's always had hands to catch the ball.
Tell us a little bit about your offensive line, Ilijah. Now, these are just the starters that I wrote down from when I had your guys' game against El Dorado. I'm sure Coach Wallen probably has a few other guys in there, but Darren Lucero, Aiden Rossetti, Alexander Morninggun, Tomas Rivera, and Samuel Chavez. I mean, those guys are probably the unsung heroes of this offense. 4 out of 5 of them are seniors. Talk to us about how big they've been for you guys this year.
Oh, big kudos to them. Those guys give me time, let me deliver a football, or even just push them guys out of the way so we can run the ball. Those guys are amazing. Have a really good chemistry with them.
Yeah, and then we'll take a look at your receivers. You guys have 4 guys that have over 100 yards receiving this season. Devin Duncan, 270 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. Ishmael Mendez, 270 receiving yards. Zachary Corona, who's also the punter. And when I saw you guys against El Dorado, he executed a very good fake punt to get a first down on 4th down. He's got 131 receiving yards. And then Mason Goudelet, as we mentioned, 127 receiving yards. So talk to us a little bit about how you're able to spread the ball around to a bunch of different guys in this offense.
A big thing is trust. In the summer, we toss the ball around almost every day, building that chemistry. And now I can just spread the ball around without having to worry if something might go wrong.
Yeah, and then getting back to the bootleg, I mean, we've beat this horse kind of dead, but man, one thing that I observed from you that I thought you do really well is you come out of that bootleg, you see a receiver downfield, you set your feet before you throw it. And you got to be careful with that, right? Because if a pass rusher's coming at you, you're probably going to get hit. But talk to us about how you've kind of perfected that part of your game.
We worked out a lot in practice. My offensive coordinator is also the QB coach there. So he's always telling me what I did right, what I did wrong. And it really helps when it comes to games.
Dad, I'll turn it to you.
There's a lot of work that your team has put in. And, we don't want to forget about the defense either. We've been talking a lot about offense because you are the starting quarterback, but your defensive unit, talk a little bit. I mean, you're on the offense, I get it, but your defense too, as part of this, your success as a team. You may not be on the defensive unit and, you don't know all their calls, but you know the guys. Tell us just a little bit about your defensive unit.
I grew up with almost everyone on that defense, and they're amazing guys. Big kudos and appreciation to my defensive coordinator. Runs a tight ship over there on that side of the ball, and I appreciate them only averaging 7-8 points against them a game.
With some tests coming up for sure, right? Now, Farmington, again, Cleveland's, we know Cleveland is Cleveland. Farmington rarely gets shut out. You would think, again, tomorrow night's a matchup. We'll preview that here in a little bit, but they can score some points. There's no doubt about it. We're going to go over your junior season a little bit. You went 7-4 last year. You finished 3rd in the district in 1-6A behind Cleveland and Rio Rancho. We had JJ Ariano on about a month and a half ago. You guys got a 6th seed in the state tournament. You have to play a first-round game. This is last year. Lost in the first round at home to Farmington. Your opponent tomorrow night, 31-21. Maybe a little bit of a revenge on the mind. What goal did you set for yourself after last season?
I worked a lot on my throwing and getting like passing around and stuff because last year I was very wide-eyed and our offense revolved around running the ball and all that. So working, passing it around, building chemistry with my wide receivers really helped this season's offense.
Okay, Nick, so you got a question, but let me finish here with a couple more questions. Cleveland is Cleveland, man, right? Coach Garza does a great job out there. Before that, Coach Ridenhour. They got a field on campus, man. They got the cannon. They got 5 uniforms, it seems like. And I'm not downgrading them at all. That's a great program out there. There's something everybody measures themselves against. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt. And as well as your team. Last time Volcano beat Cleveland was the 2019 season when a guy named Diego Pavia was the starting quarterback for Volcano Vista. So that's not that long ago. It's not. It's only it seems like a long time ago, man. But of course, Diego Pavia, big win on Saturday with Vanderbilt. Let's get into that a little bit. I'm going to have my son kick some questions to you too. Did you watch the game Saturday with Vanderbilt versus Alabama? Did you watch the game?
Yes, sir. Yes, I did.
You know what? I'll be honest, man. My prediction was Alabama 59, Vanderbilt 14. The spread was 40. I don't know that anybody saw this, man. Maybe somebody did in Vegas. I don't know. Better might have said, hey, we're going to take a chance on that. I don't think anybody would have seen that. Did you watch Diego Pavia play in 2019?
Yes, sir. I've always grown up a Hawk. So after practices for Yaffle, I would go leave and go watch his games on Fridays.
Okay, so you've met him. Have you met him? You met him before?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did he have any advice for you, or about playing quarterback, or what kind of? I think a lot of people know he wears his emotions on his sleeves, man. There's no doubt about it. I don't think he's the best at anything. He doesn't have the greatest arm. He's not the fastest. What he does do, he moves the sticks. He has the intangibles. He's a leader. His teammates will run through the wall for him. The coach believes in him, and I don't know if we've seen a better leader at that position in a long, long time from New Mexico. We can brag about that. And his interview after the game was New Mexico tinged, no doubt about it. The excitement with and yet I think I've watched that 4 or 5 times. He's a New Mexican, man. We're going to be happy about that. What has Coach Wallen talked about? Has he talked about Diego about? I'm sure he has. Has he talked about Diego Pavia during practice?
Oh, yeah. Sir.
What has he said?
He talks a lot about how he controlled the offense and how he ran the game and ran this offense. And yeah.
Yeah, I bet he had a lot to say. One more question. Then my son might have some questions on Diego, and then he wants to ask you some questions concerning Farmington. But Volcano Vista, if you think about the quarterbacks, Diego Pavia, Elliot Pascal-Bell. I love the Elliot Pascal-Bell, man. That dude had a gun. I like that dude a lot. I think he's playing somewhere. I don't know where he's playing at, but he's playing college, I think. I liked him a lot. So what does it mean to you to be able to carry that torch and be the next quarterback? Again, the names we mentioned, Diego Pavia just beat the number 1 team in the nation, man, in the nation. And I don't know that any New Mexico quarterback going back, Jim Everett, the great Jim Everett. I'd have to think about some other quarterbacks that played, from New Mexico. Jim Everett played at Purdue many years ago. But what does it mean for you to be able to carry that torch, man? That's a heck of a torch there. It really is. What does it mean to you?
Oh, it's huge. My sophomore season was when I got to hang out with Elliot a lot, and T kind of took me under his wing and basically taught me this offense, and all kudos go to him.
Well, you had to, carry on too, man. It's he helped, but you have to have some talent there too, and you do. Nick, go ahead. You're going to preview the Farmington game. You might have some questions about Diego Pavia as well.
Yeah, no. One question comes from our producer, Eric Moulton. He had a question for you about offense. What are the keys to running a good RPO run pass option, and what are you focusing on in the defensive alignment? How do you answer that question, Elijah?
A lot of it is the stack in the box. If it's a 3-3 or a 4-4-3, 4-4, reading that backer or that DN really helps. I tend to look at the eyes of the DN or backer, and that kind of gives me the answer every time.
Yeah. And what are the challenges pre-snap for you? We mentioned earlier in the show, a lot of the time you guys go no huddle. So you probably got to make that read pretty quick. You have some time on the play clock. If you go no huddle, you probably have, I don't know, anywhere between 10 and 20 seconds to kind of decide, are you going to check down the play? Are you going to get into something else? But what's your kind of pre-snap process?
I always check the halo of the field. So if it's a 1 high, 2 high, or if it's quarters, anything like that. And then I'll look into the box and read the movement, what the backers are doing, telling if they can blitz and all that.
We've talked a lot about you, Ilijah. We've talked a lot about guys on the offensive side of the ball. We haven't talked a ton about defense, but man, these last 4 games, your defense has not allowed double-digit points. 28-6 win over Sandia, 35-7 win over West Mesa, 28-8 win over El Dorado, and a 48-7 win over Pedro Vista. I mean, as a quarterback, you got to be happy with how those guys on the defensive side of the ball are getting it done.
Yes, sir. Oh, they're doing an amazing job on that side of the ball. A lot of it has to do with our linebackers and our D-end or D-line. They're doing a great job out there. And then our secondaries hasn't allowed very much, if anything.
Talk to us a little bit about the game last year, Ilijah. You guys were upset in the first round against Farmington. You're the 6th seed. They're the 11 seed. I remember when the brackets came out, not saying I penciled Volcano Vista in for a win, but that game caught most people by surprise. What do you remember most from that game?
A lot. That game, I watched that game a lot over this past season, or past summer. A lot of it was trust, I believe, and me being very wide-eyed to the game because it was my first season on varsity.
Yeah. And what are the keys tomorrow, Ilijah? You guys have won 5 in a row. You're coming off a win in the four corners. It's a short week of prep, right? You guys played, I think it was either Friday or Saturday, so you have 3 practices coming into a Thursday night game. What are the keys for tomorrow night's game?
A lot of it was film. We watch a ton of film every day. And I feel like we're mentally prepared to go into this game and get a win.
So Volcano Vista has Farmington tomorrow night at Community Stadium. You can also watch that game online. Go to the ProView Network's webpage or go to gamevision.io. Get a subscription. You can check that game out again tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at Community Stadium. Dad, I'll turn it back to you to close us out.
Ilijah Hansen, the quarterback for the Volcano Vista Hawks. Volcano Vista currently 5-1, ranked number 4 in the latest NMOT polls. They'll take on number 10 Farmington tomorrow night at Community Stadium at 7 p.m. And again, you mentioned Farmington beating you last year 31-21. You watched a lot of film. And, you know, anytime someone puts you out like that, there's like, hey, man, we want to get them back. But you've got some other challenges. There's one game at a time. Definitely one game that you got Rio Rancho and Cleveland and Cibola. And, you know, Cibola's improved under Chris Howe. They're not they don't have the quite the personnel they did in the past, but still, those are rival games, but one game at a time. Ilijah, we sure appreciate you being our guest tonight on Road to the Pit. And, you know, we wish you the best of luck tomorrow night against Farmington. Thanks so much for being our guest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Good luck, and we'll talk to you down the line. Take care.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, son.
Our head coach of our local football program, Bronco Mental.
The details themselves with the right preparation can separate you from mediocre competitors that don't do that. And so, yeah, the attention to detail, I think, drives the execution, or should I say brings the execution to life, especially in critical moments.
Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said let him cook.
Welcome back to the Pit Press Live, Road to the Pit. I'm Ed Nunez, along with my co-host, my son, Nick Nunez. We just had Volcano Vista quarterback Ilijah Hansen on. And I'll tell you one thing, son, he's a quiet guy, man, but a leader. And, you know, you had great questions. And, I think you could tell he has command of the offense. And he just the way he describes the RPO, his receivers, he has a lot to digest as far as being the quarterback there. And I thought it was being a quiet guy, but you could tell he really takes what he does seriously.
No doubt. Yeah, the first time I saw Ilijah Hansen interviewed was after that game where Volcano Vista defeated Las Cruces 27-24. We talked to Ilijah a little bit about that, and he was interviewed by James Yodis in the Albuquerque Journal. Kind of came across the same way, a shy, quiet, reserved leader. But he's poised and he leads by example. And he's got this team playing really, really well. And if you ever get the chance to see him play, you should. I mean, you have an opportunity tomorrow again, Community Stadium on the west side of Albuquerque, 7 p.m. Man, he executes that play action RPO very, very well. He's a dual threat quarterback, 12 total touchdowns, over 1,000 all-purpose yards. So he's somebody that leads by example. And he's got the Hawks rolling right now for sure.
Yeah, it's a good point there, son. You know what? I think our producer, Eric Moulton, who's Ryan Tamari, will have a show right after we're done, and he usually produces for us, and it's Eric Moulton tonight. And I want to thank Eric and Ryan, who are the co-owners of the Pit Press. This company has grown so much, and I know you and I are very happy to be a part of it. So thanks to our producer, Eric Moulton, tonight. But, Nick, we want to go over some games for last week. And the first one was Cleveland shutting out Farmington, who plays Volcano Vista for tomorrow night at Community Stadium. Only 19 offensive snaps. Game lasted less than an hour. Storm have won 5 in a row. They play Cibola next week.
Yeah, no, Cleveland's been rolling. I mean, they lost in week 1 to Centennial, and since then they've won 5 in a row. They really do seem like they're one of those top 3 teams in the 6A classification right now. The latest NMOT coaches poll, it was La Cueva 1, Centennial 2, Cleveland 3, Volcano Vista 4. So Cleveland's looking really good these last 5 games.
Eric's going to put up the rankings. Go ahead, Eric, when you get a chance, if you could, put up the rankings from the NMOT. And there they are right there. Nick, La Cueva, number 1. Centennial's playing some good football. We might have to get somebody on. Their quarterback is really good. Cleveland, number 3. Volcano Vista, number 4. 6A. Las Cruces, number 5. Rio Rancho, number 6. Los Lunas, number 7. Hobbs, number 8. Sandia, number 9. And Farmington, Volcano Vista's opponent tomorrow, number 10. And then Artesia's number 1 in Class 5A. In Class 4A, Bloomfield, Bernalillo Spartans right behind them, though. In Class 3A, St. Mike's. In Class 2A, Texaco. And 8-man, it's Melrose, and then 6-man, it's Logan. Thanks, Eric. That gives everybody kind of an idea on the rankings there. Another game we wanted to preview, Nick, was Los Lunas 28, Albuquerque High 7. Big, I had Desmond Anaya on the sports desk last week for ProView Networks, and kind of a coming out party there for Albuquerque High. Teams were battling for a tie for first place with La Cueva. It was a tough first half, and Albuquerque High was in it, and at the half, it was a very close game. Low scoring, you mentioned 3-0 at the half. They got a safety in the third quarter to make it 5-0. Score was only 13-7 going into the fourth quarter. but Los Lunas had two touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make the final score 28-7. So talk a little bit about that game. You and I did West Mesa, Los Lunas out there a couple weeks ago. And you know what, Nick, you haven't done a ton of football games, but Los Lunas is one of my favorite places to call football, man. That's a great place.
It really is, and they're in the process of a huge renovation in the stadium, or for the stadium. It's Tiger Stadium down in the village of Los Lunas. Like you said, the atmosphere down there is spectacular. People in Valencia County love their high school football, and they come out and make it a great atmosphere. When we had that West Mesa game a couple weeks ago, I feel like the whole side for Los Lunas was full with parents, family members, students. It's just a great atmosphere. And Los Lunas picked up a really big win over Albuquerque High. Los Lunas might have the game of the week tomorrow night, I believe. I believe the game's going to be played at Wilson Stadium. They got La Cueva. And I think that's going to be kind of the biggest test of the year for Los Lunas. It's a District 2 6A matchup. Winner goes into first place. La Cueva's been rolling. Since beating Pinnacle in Arizona, they've won in convincing fashion in every single one of their games. They just recently beat their rival El Dorado 56-7. So game of the week, probably tomorrow at Wilson Stadium at 7 p.m. La Cueva taking on Los Lunas.
And, you mentioned La Cueva and Greg Henningsen, I think starting with Jeremy Maupin and Los Lunas, and then Greg Henningsen won the championship there in 2021 against Jeremy Maupin and Artesia. He's done a great job of building culture. There's no doubt Los Lunas' program moved up, and they're good. But tomorrow against La Cueva, Cheeto Lombrero, the running back, Cam Dyer, the quarterback, Mason Poza, the linebacker who roams sideline to sideline, and it's a different test tomorrow night. So good luck to Los Lunas. La Cueva beat El Dorado last week, 56-7. In Class 5A was Los Alamos in a close one, 36-34 over Belen. Los Alamos, after starting the season, has won 4 in a row. They're currently in first in District 1. Mayfield 50 and Lovington 49. Lovington started out the season, I believe, 5-0. Back-to-back losses. You mentioned that. After starting the season 5-0, Lovington lost to Artesia at home 57-21. Talk a little bit about Lovington, Coach. We did Lovington and Portales last year at Greyhound Stadium in Portales. And really took it to them. They did. Started out 5-0, and they've kind of backslid a little bit here. But Artesia had started out slow. They're Artesia. You knew dang well that wasn't going to last.
Yeah, Artesia just has such a tradition of winning that even if they start out a couple games behind, they're always going to pick it back up. They showed that against Lovington. That was a road game for Artesia. It was played at Brian Urlacher Field in Lovington. This was a game 2 weeks ago. And Artesia came out, and I think they won that game. I could be wrong, 57-21. So Artesia really took it to Lovington. And Lovington has now lost back-to-back games at home. They just lost 50-49 against Mayfield. You just read off the score. That was a homecoming game for Lovington. We mentioned they got a brand new quarterback this year, Matthew Prudencio, who's playing really well. But losing 2 games at home in Class 5A, Lovington wants a top 4 seed. You get a top 4 seed in the state tournament, you get a home game. You get a bye week. And so losing back-to-back district games at home makes it tough for Lovington. They also have a tradition of winning. They've got the second most state championships in the state of New Mexico behind Artesia. I think they won their 21st state championship this last year when they beat Portales. So I think Lovington's going to bounce back, but a good win for Mayfield, too, who started the season kind of slow. They go onto the road, beat Lovington on the road. So big win for Mayfield, and Lovington looking to rebound.
Roswell 48, Gadsden 7, big win for Roswell. They've won 3 in a row, and since losing to Lovington, and Jeff Lynn does such a great job down there at Roswell. I had him on last year on the sports desk. Just a great guy. Miyamura 36, Highland 31, 5 late changes in that game. Amiri Mumba 63-yard touchdown run. He's still struggling with that ankle injury. Coach, I've talked to a couple of people at Highland, and he did have 2 second-half touchdowns for Highland. Loss drops, Highland's big loss for Highland. They're still in it, but they dropped into 4th in District 1 5A, and they have a bye week, and they needed the bye week. And I've got the game against Belen next week at Milne Stadium. Big game for the Hornets, fight for that playoff spot next week against Belen.
Yeah, Highlands lost 2 really close games. I think it was week 2 they lost to Bernalillo. I think it was 20-19, and then they lost this last one on Saturday against Miamira. And it was just a back and forth game, like you mentioned, with 5 lead changes. Amiri Mumba, who we've had on Road to the Pit Press Live, he was battling injury the last couple of weeks. It looks like he's back at full strength, having a 63-yard touchdown and 2 rushing touchdowns in the second half. But Highland's going to have to win probably 2 or 3 of their last 4 games if they want to get a spot in the 5A state tournament.
That was a tough loss. Again, a tough game. So we'll see what happens. A team that I'm very impressed with. Bernalillo beat Kirtland Central 54-0. Bernalillo quarterback Uriel Cathro threw 7 touchdown passes. Bernalillo perfect on the season. A very tough win against Espanola Valley a couple weeks ago. Espanola Valley went for 2 to win. They didn't get it. So Bernalillo under Coach John Kobos, who I really like a lot, is doing a great job out there. And, Bernalillo, he's done a good job there. He's built a good culture there, football, for about 5 years now. And, Bernalillo more known for basketball before then, but Coach Kobos has done a great job there.
He has. And Bernalillo, I think it's in 2 weeks. It's going to be a showdown between the number 1 team in Class 4A versus the number 2 team in Class 4A. Bernalillo and Bloomfield, who are in the same district, are going to square off, not this week, but next week. So really looking forward to that one when that one comes up.
Coach Kovacs does a really good job out there in Bloomfield. I had the championship when they beat Silver a couple of years ago, and they're really good. They're a good team. Taos 27, Espanola Valley 7. Second straight loss for Espanola Valley. And Taos had their new coach come in July, and I had him a couple weeks ago, and they beat Valley. But it's tough to get a system like that. But second straight loss for Espanola Valley. The Sun Devils had lost to Barn Burner. We mentioned to Bernalillo 21-20 the week prior. Back-to-back losses puts them in 4th in District 1A behind Bloomfield, Bernalillo, and Grants, and Taos. Tough district. Espanola on the road against Kirtland Central. Taos travels to Grants. A game that I want to talk about here. Pius, your alma mater, wearing gray pants, gray jerseys, and black numerals. And I mentioned on the show somewhere, Coach Ray Giannini, is what happened to my Sartans, man. That's a different color pattern, Coach, than even you're used to seeing. Yeah, Pius 35, Academy 21, and Rick Thompson are another Sartan alumni weighing in on that. I think I said it right. So anyway, I did the game out there at Community Stadium. Academy led 14-7 at the half. And I got to tell you something funny, son. I asked Coach Jim Cook, the athletic director, to come on at half. Wanted to talk to him, and he's like, "Nah, I'm too mad. I might say something, man." So he declined. But Pius turned around second half. Now, I think one of the things about that team, they've got a young quarterback in Isaiah Carpenter. Curtis Flakes III is a sophomore. Carpenter's a sophomore. Caleb Diggs, what's the cornerback? Diggs, I can't.
Curtis Flakes the third.
No, they have another guy that's their cornerback. I can't remember his name, but he's a sophomore. And then Herschel Holloway, he's a sophomore. They're a young team, and sometimes they struggle. But then I just said this to Coach Gary Sanchez, who did the color commentary with me. I said Herschel Holloway is due. He's due for, and boom, 52-yard run. So he's a threat to take it to the house at any time, son. You've had them. They're ranked 6th in Class 4A. They go on the road, take on the number 4 team, and this is a test for at Portales. That's a test. Talk a little bit about, you've seen Pius. That's your alma mater. Talk a little bit about them.
I love Coach Curtis Flakes. We've had him on the show on the Pit Press Live. Got a ton of respect for him. I think he's done a lot with the young team, like you mentioned. I mean, they started, 16 freshmen and 1 8th grader last year. A lot of those guys coming back. They got a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. You mentioned his name, Cale Cox-Liggins, the receiver.
Cale Cox-Liggins, also a quarterback. Go ahead.
Yeah, Cale Cox-Liggins, the receiver, number 5. He's got Division I size. He's 6'5". He's just growing into his body. He's only a sophomore. And Coach Flakes loves to take shots down the field to him. They're balanced. They got a lot of other receivers too. Brian Thomas is another guy they like to throw to. Christian Morales is who they run in the slot. They got a lot of weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They've got some playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. When Pius beat Moriarty earlier this year at Community Stadium, they had one of their defensive linemen. I want to say it was Michael Deller. I could be wrong. He forced a fumble, ran it back for a touchdown. So they're balanced, but they do have a big test against Portales. If they can win that game, I think St. Pius is for real.
I think you're right. And remember, these are only sophomores. They've got 2 more years to play, and I still think on some offensive things they're still coming into their own. You mentioned Cale Cox-Liggins, 6'5". You think Coach Myers has talked to him, the head basketball coach? I was wondering that. I wondered. He's got basketball size. I wonder. We love Coach Myers. He does a great job over there, and I'm half joking. But when you see size like that as a basketball coach, you're looking down like we could use that guy. That guy's got great size, rangy, has the hands, the whole thing. Number 1, Bloomfield Bobcats, the number 1 team in Class 4A. They were idle. They go on the road to take on Moriarty. In Class 3A, Coach St. Michael's 60, Hope Christian 7. They do a great job out there. Got a couple more scores to run down. We'll wrap it up. Coach, I got to say this, though. Legacy Academy under Brian Clampett. They just moved up to 11-man. They're having a heck of a season, man. Coach Clampett, I might ask him to be my guest next week on the sports desk. They beat Raton 34-0. Legacy Academy, you wrote, coming up to 11-man football, 3 touchdowns in the final 4 minutes of the first half. They're 6-0 on the season, currently ranked 3rd in Class 2A. Talk a little bit about Legacy Academy under the former Lobo, Brian Clampett.
I think it's tough to make the transition from 8-man football to 11-man football in 1 year and have the success in the season that the Legacy Academy Silverbacks have had. They don't have a home stadium. Most high school football teams don't. Most high school football teams in the metro area play at Milne Stadium, Wilson Stadium, or Community Stadium. But Legacy Academy kind of will play wherever. I mean, they just played their home game against Raton at Bernalillo High School this last weekend. They've got a balanced attack. Another game that sticks out to me that they won earlier this year was against Hope Christian, who's in the 4A or the 3A classification, so class up. And Legacy Academy held off a Hope Christian comeback in the 4th quarter and won that game. So the Silverbacks looking really good in Class 2A. The top 2 teams in Class 2A, I believe, are Texaco and Eunice. That's Southeast New Mexico, where football is king. So jury's still out on the Legacy Academy Silverbacks, but they've looked really good so far.
Well, Coach, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Road to the Pit. Again, we want to thank Ilijah Hansen, and we might have to rename it. Basketball's coming up. Road to the Pit always sounds good, but we also cover, as we mentioned, we've had Amy Fankum on, the girls soccer coach at Hope Christian, and we've tried to cover some other athletes. We covered some football, and maybe down the line we might have a soccer player or coach in here. But I think we've got Mackenzie Bishop coming on, and I don't know if we want to take a commercial break and then come back. I think we do. But, Coach, anything else? I mean, great show. Son, always great research as always, and, you try to keep me on that line and make sure I don't go off on too many tangents, man. I got to say, son, I tease you about your hair a lot. Tonight, it might have looked better than I've seen it in weeks, So good job with the gel or whatever you used on it, man. Maybe I'll try some. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Dad. Just last comment, wanted to show some love to the Albuquerque native, Diego Pavia. I know we mentioned it with the interview with Ilijah Hansen. For our listeners who don't know, Diego Pavia did graduate from Volcano Vista High School in 2019. He led Volcano Vista to a perfect 10-0 or 11-0 regular season. And then Volcano Vista did lose to Rio Rancho in the semifinal. But Diego Pavia's passing numbers his senior season at Volcano Vista, 1,485 passing yards, 14 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He gets a lot of flack from Lobo fans, and I get it, right? I get it. He peed on the field. He didn't apologize. I understand why people are upset, but I really would encourage Lobo fans to put that behind them and not let that define who Diego Pavia is. He's done a lot to put New Mexico on the map. He had a terrific season last year at New Mexico State, Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year. He just knocked off the number 1 team in the country. He's made history. His name will never be forgotten, and I think people in Albuquerque should really kind of look at that. So that's the way I see it. I just wanted to end on that comment, Coach.
Coach, I'd agree. I think, you're right. He had a heck of a game that should not be forgotten. He's a leader. Like I said, he doesn't have the greatest arm. He's not the fastest. He moves the sticks. He's got the intangibles. He's a great leader. So congratulations to Diego Pavia. That'll do it for this episode of Road to the Pit. For my co-host, Nick Nunez, I'm Ed Nunez. Stay tuned. We've got another live Pit Press show coming up shortly.
See the envy me, passing it off like CP3. Shawty, she calling me MVP. I be on time, it's something you ain't never seen before. They call me the Dama, really want my whole team to score. Damn, yeah, too icy, yeah, too clean, yeah, my zone, yeah, 2-3, yeah, got shooters that hit from deep, bust like Giannis, yeah, too mean. Bright lights like we at the garden, on P, don't even started. Whole team walk in me the party. If I can't make the play, I'ma lob it. If you jump, that's right on your head. Had to put him to sleep, go to bed. I'm a star, drop 50 and left. From the logo, like I'm Steph. Put it up, knock him down every time. Going hard like my life on the line. Catch me on the course, I would've dimed. Never losing, I put it on mine. Had to get on my shell, I've been laying low. Take it real when it comes to the playoffs. You fight with me, know it's a KO.
Hey, welcome back to the Pit Press Live. Ed, man, I always thoroughly enjoy your guys' interviews with the high school athletes around Albuquerque and New Mexico. I think it kind of just sheds a light on the talent level that we have here in the state. Obviously, with Diego Pavia and what he was able to do this last weekend is just kind of opening the door and giving hope to other guys around the 505, injecting some positive influence. Overall, great interview. I think that kid's got a bright future. I've seen some highlight reels on social media. He's got a really good athletic ability. The kid can run, he can throw it, and really just developing as an overall athlete. So kudos to you guys. I really enjoyed that interview.
No, you know what? I appreciate that, Eric. He's unusual, and he's real quiet. You know, I talked to him the other day, and I can kind of tell he's you know, a lot of guys, especially at the quarterback level, put their emotions out there, and he doesn't. But he's smart, man. You know, we asked him, my son asked him about plays and what he looks at the line of scrimmage. Real smart guy, and you know, I think he is a different kind of leader. But at that quarterback position, he's definitely a leader. You know what, Eric? I got to tell you, man, I'm lucky. My son is lucky. We're lucky to be able to broadcast together. You know, that's a dream. But to be able to cover high school sports and even the college sports at the D2 level, hey, man, it doesn't get any better. I'm lucky. I get the best seat in the house sometimes, and so does my son. So we're lucky to be able to do that together. And I got to tell you, my son, the research king, will research till the cows come home, man. You know, most of the stuff I know because I've seen it. But my son will go read articles from different newspapers and research. So I'm real proud of him. He does a great job.
The dynamic duo, the Nunez clan. But we, as you guys can tell, we've got a new guest on, Mr. Mackenzie Bishop. Abrazo Mac, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing good. First of all, we're past the bye week. It's officially game week. Home game against Air Force. How are you feeling about it?
You know, when you're a Loba fan as long as we are, you never want to get too confident. But I feel as good as I felt about a game going into a game as I felt in a while. I think we're going to be healthy. We were down 6 starters last game. I think the bye week came at a great time. Most of those starters being on defense, and we're super thin with this roster on defense. You know, we don't have great skill at the 2 level yet. So I'm pretty excited to get all those guys back and feel like we can put together a much better effort defensively. And I think Devin and the offense will show up like they always do.
Yeah, Air Force has always had a pretty solid program for as long as I can remember, right? One of those academies, and they're a different team this year. They're extremely young. Ryan had Sean O'Toole, who's a beat writer for Air Force football, on our show last night, and he did mention that Air Force this year is extremely young. I forgot how many freshmen he said, but they had to insert some of those guys into contributing roles right away, so they're still kind of under development. And man, for this Lobo team coming off of a win, I think it's perfect timing for them to kind of get some swagger back and be able to do some damage in the Mountain West. They've got some winnable games coming up. So I know at the beginning of the season, the experts in Vegas kind of set that win total at 1.5. We're just about there, and they've got some games coming up where I think they can actually win and keep winning. So looking forward to that. But elephant in the room, I know Ed and Nick talked about it earlier. Diego Pavia, how much of that game did you watch, and initial knee-jerk reaction?
6-8 minutes of it. I didn't even know it was really going on, and then I saw it on X or on Twitter, and I was like, oh, I gotta tune in. They got a chance. And I'll be honest with you, like I don't know. The kid has a chip on his shoulder. He's definitely got moxie, and it's kind of like Jalen House, right? Like he's the kind of guy you really love having on your team, and you hate when he's on the other team. And all the disrespect aside, I think if he could do it over again, he probably wouldn't have done the things that he did when he was here in Albuquerque. But as a New Mexico story, and to have a kid, from Volcano Vista go and play at that level against that competition on the national stage and do what he did. And, it's just every time he encounters adversity and runs into a situation where people are doubting him, he seems to just rise to the occasion. And you can't help but take your hat off and have a ton of respect for that.
Yeah, the guy just knows how to win, and he's won at every level when all the cards were stacked against him at pretty much every step of the way. And it's nice to see a kid from the South Valley, Albuquerque, kind of make it that far, and it's featured on all these interviews with Scott Van Pelt and ESPN and things like that, like things that people really dream of when you're growing up playing football. So it's really cool to see a local kid getting that kind of exposure and seeing the success that he is.
Well, and the Aggies are on right now, and it's not going quite as well as it would have gone last year with him at the helm. So,
yeah, watching that too. New Mexico State's down 40-6 halfway through the third quarter. So that's not.
Jacksonville State may have a little better defense than we have.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But yeah, just segueing into Vanderbilt, right there in the SEC. Some news that recently broke, and I know that you're kind of in those conversations a lot and pay close attention with conference realignment and everything that's kind of going on with the NCAA and whatnot. But Project Rudy really kind of perked up yesterday, drew a lot of criticism. I think it raised a lot of eyebrows too. Ed, I'm not sure how much you know about it. We kind of briefly touched on it yesterday, but Mackenzie, I kind of want your kind of reaction to it, what your thoughts are on it. Is it sustainable? And essentially, what does that do to the Mountain West and a program like UNM?
Well, I think it's important to start first and think about why something like this would get traction. And a big part of it, if we talk about the House settlement, if you've done some research, there's been some movement on that in terms of the House settlement moving forward, which is essentially the NCAA on the hook for, holding players from getting name, image, and likeness for a long time. So there's some back pay to players back, a handful of years. And then what does that look like going forward from a revenue sharing perspective? And creating some parameters and coming up with some kind of settlement. Now, I have no idea if it's going to come to fruition, but it is somewhat of the template of, I think, what's going to happen in the future. And the way that thing is structured, at least as the House settlement is proposed, is up to $22 million per year of revenue that schools will be allowed to share with student athletes. And that's student athletes across all sports. And it will, by and large, I believe, have to comply with Title IX restrictions. And so, the issue that comes along with that is, schools like Alabama and Ohio State's like, oh, sweet, like we'll do $22 million right away and just make sure that we're not, going to have to pay additional damages. And they can do that because their annual budget is in excess of $150 million a year, pushing $200 million a year. That's not a big amount of money for them. But for schools like Vanderbilt or schools like University of New Mexico, a $22 million, amount, even in the SEC, Vanderbilt relies heavily on TV revenue to pay for everything because their actual, sports revenue aren't that high. And you can see the lower tier of those Power Four conferences probably stressing a lot about what that looks like and how they remain competitive. And the SEC and these power conferences are probably going to have minimum levels of investment that these schools have to make in order to maintain their membership and their conferences. And so it's going to be really interesting. It's really separating, the way that the Rudy project, I mean, we should probably dive a little bit more into the details of how they're proposing that to be set up. And I don't necessarily know that it's going to happen, but this is the second proposal in 2 or 3 weeks that we've seen that's kind of created this 70 to 72 team strata that's like the new power, the power level of football. What's unique about this one is they are trying to cut out any games between the Power Four and the rest of FBS, which is would be a pretty significant blow from a budget standpoint, but also just from a competitive standpoint. The best games of the year are these games when Northern Illinois goes in and beats a team, or New Mexico State beats Auburn. Like it truly gives this opportunity for some David versus Goliath stuff. And if we eliminate that completely, which is what this thing is proposing, that really is like college sports misses out, and it really takes away the essence of what's awesome about college football, in my opinion.
Yeah, we also have to consider like UNM, for example, this year when they went to Auburn, when they played at Arizona, the money that they received from those schools to go travel and play there, right? I'm not sure what the total was, but I think at Auburn it was like a 1.9 million.
Yeah, it was the third or fourth largest payout of the year in Division I. And I think Arizona was 1.3, 1.4. So, I mean, between the two is in excess of $3 million that comes to the University of New Mexico. And if we don't have those games, I mean, a lot of schools depend on those games to kind of make it work. And so, it really is unfortunate. It's just more, one more move towards, this kind of separation of college football and the haves getting more and the have-nots being further away. And ironically, none of the pack whatever teams are mentioned in those 70. And it's going to be crazy with all these twists and turns. We could end up right back together here in the not too distant future if some of this stuff comes to fruition.
You know what? I just got to. Can I interject something here real quick,
ahead,
Eric?
Yeah.
It says, I just read on that. It says like this would propose for 2031. I guess they're looking at that to down the line somewhere as to get this proposed. But I'm reading, and this thing is, you mentioned the have and the have-nots. So when I read it, it sounds like to me the haves want a corner. Why should they share with anybody else? Let's just do a power league and forget everybody else. Like you mentioned, those old-time matchups. They want to corner this. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you one thing, Mackenzie, I've never seen such change so quick with the NIL and everything else. The conference realignment back in the day before you were even born, man, right? When the Lobos were part of the WAC, I didn't see them. I didn't see Arizona and Arizona State split, right? They split. It did better for them. But the conference people that we played against at that time, Utah and BYU, I miss those rivalries. UTEP,
me too.
Man, I miss those. I hated
those late '90s games between the Lobos and Doliak and Hana Metalo with Utah and the BYU teams back then. I mean, that was some epic rivalry action.
I can go back to when Danny Ainge played for BYU.
Yep.
Fred Roberts. Utah had when Rick Majerus was Jerry Pym coached Utah back in the day. People wouldn't remember Jerry Pym. Jerry Pym was a coach at Utah, and so things have changed so quickly now. When they're talking about this, it's all about the dollar, right? The haves and the have-nots. You mentioned this is going to be very interesting. Of course, that settlement just coming down the other day. Things are changing on the fly every single day, man. It seems, right? Now, one of the things Coach Mendenhall said about 3 weeks ago at the press conference, he said this, and it kind of, when he said, I could see some of these teams circling back to the Mountain West when they left. And when he said that, I'm thinking, why the heck would they do that? But now you're saying that is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to see how. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to see exactly how it's going to play out. If we talk about the Rudy project specifically, they break it into 3 tiers, the revenue splits, and the top 16, like the numbers will make your eyes blow out of your mind. I mean, they're talking about $250 million per year for the top 16 teams. And then, having more like ACC Big 12 level payouts for the bottom 30. The thing you have to keep in mind is the SEC schools, the way they see this is they're like, we own the world. Why would we let our 10th and 12th best team, take a $30 million pay cut when we don't have to? And so, I don't necessarily think that this model in particular is gonna happen or come to fruition. But when stuff like this gets leaked, it gets leaked for a reason. It gets leaked to check the market, to check the vibe, to see what the public thinks about it and see if it's got any legs. And if that doesn't work, then they revisit it and they'll go back into their conference rooms and figure out a different approach and a different model. But I do think the stratification and them trying to separate away from the non-power football teams is only going to continue, and what form that takes is the ultimate question. But I do see, Ed, going back to what you said, if that stratification really does exist, then I really do think the non-power FBS football programs really have to kind of revisit their approach and how do they come up with the best possible product and come up with a FCS style 16-team tournament or something like that. How do they rebrand and repackage their product to create as much revenue as they can and remain competitive and remain relevant for their, respective fan bases, for their donors, and also for their student athletes.
The big question is, I don't know if this proposal specifically outlined anywhere in detail on what sports it was kind of designated for. I think the obvious answer is this is a football only move, but it was not necessarily ruled out that it's going to be applied to all sports, because if you apply it to all sports, and then, I mean, some of the Olympic sports at some of these universities take a hit too. But any comment on that?
I mean, if you look at basketball, there's been a huge push to expand the size of the field, which I don't necessarily inherently think is a bad thing. But if they expand the field of the NCAA tournament by 8 teams, of those 8, how many do you think are going to be non-Power 5 or Power 4 schools?
Yeah,
6 or 7 of those will just be the 8th, 9th, and 10th best teams in the Big 12, not the 3rd and 4th best team in the Mountain West.
You're kind of seeing that now with what they're trying to reshape the NIT into, right? Like some of those small schools that you enjoy watching, some of the Cinderellas, and they're trying to squeeze them out to squeeze some of those big conference teams in that are quote unquote drawing the viewership on TV, which, I mean, the best part about March Madness to me, in my eyes, is really those underdogs, those small conference teams beating the big teams that are driving crowds crazy, right? Those are the most entertaining games and really what makes March Madness. So you're kind of removing that aspect to it.
Honestly, the way, in my opinion, to solve this is kind of the model that they're talking about now, but with true relegation and promotion. Where if we're New Mexico and we invest heavily and we get a good run, get a great quarterback, have good coaching staff like we have now, 3-4 years from now, we're winning 10 games a year. If that could happen, that would be amazing. Where we'd have a chance to be team number 69 or 70. and we have to maintain that to stay in that. But like we have ultimate upside potential. It's the way English soccer works, right?
Soccer, right? I was just going to say,
and I think English soccer has it figured out. It works great. Like the games matter. Everybody always has a chance, even if they kind of don't from a resource standpoint, but at least everybody feels like they've got a fighter's chance. And, this model is just like block them out. And, if you're stuck in purgatory between FCS and Power 4 of FBS, then, tough, like that is what it is. But if we had some kind of true promotion relegation model like that in football, then truly like the rest of the sports could be geographic conferences. We could go back to that and say, we're going to treat football in a completely different way. It's a completely different platform. Football teams charter to all their games, so geographics don't really matter that much in football. They really don't. Rivalries are important. Yeah, I get all that, but like, let's get all the Olympic sports and basketball in true geographic conferences where they have rivalries and convenience, and it's all about the student athletes. They're not traveling, 4 days out of a week to go to a weekend, some weekend games. And we treat football as a separate entity, which it really has become. I think it would be the most pragmatic approach. Now, that would take power away from the Vanderbilts of the world and the Iowa States of the world that, are not these top tier brands. Maybe they have good years every once in a while. I know Iowa State's leading the Big 12 in football right now, so it's probably a bad example. But, maybe a Oklahoma State or something like that, where they've got a good year out of every little bit. That would involve them potentially giving up some power and some revenue, so they'll never vote for it. And that's a challenge. It'd be hard to get to that, but I do think that is the model that actually has makes the most sense from an equity and from a keeping college sports awesome.
Speaking of equity, this Rudy project introduced the idea of having private equity be involved in this too, upwards of $9 billion. And I think that's over a 10 to 12 year span. But I think that's being introduced at the major league and professional levels right now. I forget what team it was that I think it was earlier this week it was announced, but that kind of throws a different twist into it, because then you're talking about ownership, right? And looking for what's the word I'm looking for? Dividends to be paid on your investment, and how is the revenue split from that point, and who's in full control here. And then you're talking about a true pay for play with the student athletes, and kind of what continues to unravel at the NCAA level. It's not the NCAA anymore. It's kind of the Wild West. But what's your thought on the private equity portion? Because $9 billion is a lot of freaking money.
Well, the private equity component comes into play to improve the cash flow of those deals. These schools are going to have, I think the back pay portion of the House settlement is like $3 billion that the NCAA and the power teams are going to have to pay. And UNM will very likely have to pay several millions of dollars as part of that settlement. Certainly nothing like the power teams will. I think the private equity comes in as basically like they're going to float the cash, and they're monetizing future revenue deals on TV. So I don't necessarily know that I don't think it's kind of the next step in the evolution. The Pac-12, there's been some rumors that the Pac-12, they're putting together their guaranteed revenue structure in collaboration with a private equity group who's kind of doing the same thing for the Pac-12. So I don't necessarily know that it's not the death of sports. This exists overseas and soccer, and I mean there's private equity money running throughout everything, and it's there's a lot of guys in private equity funds that have a ton of capital that needs a home to make a rate of return, and they just see this as the next investment opportunity. So I don't necessarily know that it's the end of the world or this terrible thing, and I think it's probably just part of the future going forward. It still comes back to TV revenue, and then how does that flow through to the players?
One quick question here. I got to ask you this. Does any of this really surprise you though? CBS, what do they pay the NCAA for broadcasting rights of March Madness? What, $2 billion? Something like that?
It's a lot. Yeah.
Okay. So look, you're a capitalist, right? You're a capitalist, man. It's
Yep.
about capital, right? It's about
It
revenue.
is.
It's about greed. It is. And call it what it is. That's fine. I don't have anybody getting, I'm not, anybody saying that people shouldn't get what they can get when they can get it, right? That's the nature of this country. But it's interesting to me, man. It's fascinating how things are just changing on the fly. And we this isn't the end of it. Project Rudy is just the beginning. We mentioned this, right? Now, look, I said this about Nick Saban, right? Saban, great coach, right? One of the greatest we've ever seen. Guy, 72 years old, looks like $1 million still, man. Still looks great. But he had said, this last year, when he was about when he resigned or retired, that a couple of his players came in and wanted $500,000, $400,000 or whatever they wanted. And he was like, hey, I'm out of it. I don't want to coach like that, right? That's not what I want to do. But that dude was making $8 million, $10 million a year? What was he making? $7 million at least? And then with the
I think he was over 10 when he left.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so he's got nothing to say, man. He's got nothing to say. Nothing at all. and there's some irony there, and I think he missed it. So, yes, the players should get this. The NCAA made how many billions of dollars off image and likeness for years off of players? You got players suing them now on back stuff, right? The NCAA has been muted. They don't exist anymore, man. They don't. And so now what's left, man? And it's going to be interesting to me. Very interesting what goes forward after this, because Project Rudy is a mind blowing. Just reading about it, I'm like, wow, holy cow. Not surprising though, right? Somebody wants a corner. Why should we share with them people when they don't make what we make, right? Why should they?
Yep.
That's their thought. And you can't blame them for it. You can't. Now, Mackenzie, we have to be honest though. The future of college sports, we really don't know, man. We don't know. We don't. It's up in the air now. We hope things. And I think Eric, you mentioned the March Madness, man. Chaminade beating Virginia, right? Years ago, number 15 beating. That's March Madness, man. You're seeing all these lower seeds, right? They're March Madness. Now, hopefully, things like that. And Mackenzie, you're right. We don't want to go off the deep end and saying it's the end or this or that, but things like that to me are very, very interesting. You got a lot of people trying to corner the market, and they've got the money to do it, man. They've got the money. And that's kind of a little bit of things. That's reality. And those are just things that, to me, we'll have to see going forward. Things are changing every day. And sometimes you pick it up, you're like, what the heck is that, man? You can't even keep up with it. But it's going to be interesting going forward, man, to me. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. I mean, I think if we had this conversation a year or two ago and we were, reading the headlines from the future, like, what? Like, there is no way that is going to happen. And you nailed it. I mean, the NCAA, I can't even say their name, and hopefully I don't have to say their name for much longer. The NCAA has created this. I mean, let's be honest.
Yes, they did.
They're stubbornness and putting their head in the sand on this issue instead of facing it, at the front and proactively and trying to come up with solutions that were workable and equitable for the players. When coaches are jumping around and they're making, 8-figure salaries in many cases on these teams, and the players are like, dude, I'm making you rich, and like I'm the one getting hurt, and I'm the one getting concussed and not able to walk when I'm older. Like, what is this? I'm the most valuable thing here. And honestly, I hate to say it, but it was like when, NCAA football, NCAA 2K came back, it was like, players are like, for a long time, everybody knew who everybody was on NCAA, but the last names weren't on there. It was just the guy's number and his attributes, and it looked like him. And it was just kind of this silly thing where, we use amateurism to make a lot of people rich. And now the paradigm has changed. And because the NCAA has refused to engage in a true debate and come up with reasonable solutions, we've got this Wild West situation that we have now. And it's almost like the carts, everything's out of the barn, and I don't know if you can get them all back. I mean, I just don't see, I think, there's a lot of chaos going on right now. And I think if we zoom back to what we all care about, which is New Mexico, and what do we have to do? I think right now we have to remain nimble. We can't be stubborn and stuck in the ways of old and doing things the way they've always been done. I think we have to be open-minded and progressive and try to be at the bleeding edge of what's happening, and come up with our own adaptation of what that looks like so that we can remain competitive and a leader. Because, I mean, this is the Rudy project is what's today. I mean, the best thing we can do is win. I mean, it's results. Right now, winning is so important. It's literally UNLV hasn't been good in football for 25 years, but they've been good the last 18 months. And they were the darling because they've been good for the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important right now. I hate to say it, but it's what have you done for me lately matters more now than it's ever mattered.
In similar news that was just released with the transfer portal, I think initially was a 60-day window for football, basketball players, was then trimmed down to 45 days about 6 months ago. And then as of yesterday was trimmed down to 30 days. Part of that rule or part of that judgment, there was a stipulation added, and I still need to get it confirmed, but it was about once a player signs with the school, other schools have to be completely cut off from continuing to recruit that player. So what I saw that, and the first thing that came to mind was a situation like JT Toppin, where he was essentially with a team that was being actively recruited. I'm not sure if you know anything about, not necessarily JT's case, but just with the new NIL, not NIL, but the transfer portal rules, the transfer window, how long they're staying open, and some of the new adjustments there.
I had seen the headlines about the national letter of intent reforms. I think that's probably what you're talking about. I didn't do enough research in the last 24 hours since it broke to see what it is. What I'll say is almost all these players have agents, and the rules probably don't prohibit coaches from talking to the agents. So yeah, you maybe not be able to contact the players directly, but I'm like, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter. Like this stuff's still going to happen. The agents are the ones that are in contact with all the schools and the coaches anyway. And yeah, it probably shortens the window when you can have visits, which might be a little bit more logistically feasible and friendly for coaches in their recruiting periods, that they're a little bit narrower. I think that probably makes some sense. I still think open transfer portal periods during the school year is like completely counter to being a student athlete. Like it just doesn't make sense to me that, in the middle of March, after, during Final Four and March Madness, that, players aren't in class. They're, out looking at the next school they want to transfer to. And it's, I don't know, none of it really is about that. I know that. That's naive of me to say, but I'm just saying, like, none of it. Yeah.
It literally opens the second round of the NCAA tournament. So it's like your team gets eliminated. And you're like, okay, well, I'm just looking for my next home now.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to go on 4 recruiting trips that span 2 weeks and miss 2 weeks of class. And whatever. We'll figure that out later. I don't know. The whole thing's kind of silly. I feel like the transfer portal should be during Christmas break and summer break, and that's it. But that's just me.
Okay. Moving on to some hoops, which is what really like my passion lies. But we're like 3 weeks out, man, from the exhibition with UTEP.
Yep. That's a Mountain West soon-to-be conference preview is what that is.
Reviving an old rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
The I-25 rivalry. But I'm excited, man. I've been following the program pretty closely. I was at the open practice that they had for media a couple of weeks ago. I was kind of bummed out that I wasn't able to go to the women's. I'm not sure if it was an open practice or a private practice. I know 505 was involved. Did you attend? How did that go?
I wasn't able to attend. Faces. I did hear that there were about 80 folks that showed up, which is awesome. By far the best attended 505 event we've ever had for women's basketball. I think, there's a lot of buzz around that roster this year. I think Bradbury's been able to put together a pretty intriguing roster with some foreign players, some transfers. So there's a lot of excitement about the talent he has coming in. So, great event. I wasn't able to attend myself. I was out of town, but it's good to see that level of interest before the season starts for the women's basketball team, because it's a great program. We're just all waiting for them to get over the hump, because they've just been real close the last couple of years, but we just need them to get there, especially in Vegas.
Yeah, I think with our platform, we're really trying to evolve, and Ryan and I have really taken a commitment to covering women's basketball more closely this year, getting Bradbury on, getting some of the players on, the same that we had with some of the men's basketball players on, and attending their games, which we went to a few games last year, but just being able to break down games and give them the same level of love that we gave the men's team, I think it's only fair. And they're good, man. They're solid, and from what I'm hearing and reading, they have a bunch of new talent that's come in. So it's exciting times, man. And we're literally in the month, just inside a month away from basketball season starting.
I want to make one real quick comment on that. As far as women's basketball, we've got Coach Flanagan just waiting to come on, man. So just give me the word. I've talked to him, and he wants to come on, and maybe we can start a Lobo Legend series with the women. I don't know as much about Lobo women, but Nikki Heckroth, who used to be the analyst on with Joe Barron and then JJ Buck, man, and played for Don Flanagan.
Our point guard for Don, yeah.
Man, she knows ball like wow. She can break the game down. She knows a lot of the Lobo women, and she'd love to be part of it, I'm sure. I think it's good for us too. If we're going to talk about Lobo women's basketball, let's bring on a women's player that played and coached there,
yep.
That knows what she's talking about. That way people don't just think we're a bunch of Neanderthal males trying to break down women's basketball too, man. I think it does good for us and good for the platform. But I think that one quick point about Coach Bradbury, and this is the truth, okay? I'm not trying to be mean about it. He had some players transfer out. He had a bunch of them transfer out, for whatever reason. He lost about 7 or 8 players, but reloaded quickly. When I was reading the paper, I'm like, geez, all right. He reloaded quickly. He lost a player, I can't remember. It was in the paper the other day, to a torn labrum for the season. And one of their girls they were dependent on, a preseason injury, but like I said, he did reload. And I got to just say this about Western New Mexico. I'm a little excited. The men's team, 7-2 transfer from Mercer. We don't know. He's got a torn ACL. He should be ready in a couple weeks. 6'11", 6'10". Their guards are better. Isaiah Marin played here for UNM in 2021 with Coach. You remember him, Mackenzie? I don't know if you remember Isaiah Marin.
Oh,
he
yeah.
played. He's playing with Western now.
That's awesome.
So that should help. But I'm telling you, that Lone Star Conference, people don't understand it. It's a tough conference, man. Those guards are beasts in that league, and we'll see. Western. I'm going to tell you. You mentioned resources. It's tough for Western to win, man. It's tough. We don't have the money that a UT Permian does. Texas A&M Kingsville, West Texas A&M. They've got the better money, better facilities. But I will say this about our athletic director, Scott Noble, who I love to death. That guy wants to win. He got us a new softball field. That's a start. One of the best fields in the conference. Facilities are important to him, but you just can't say, give me $50 million for this. He's got to go through the legislature. One good thing is Howie Morales is the lieutenant governor. He's from Silver, man. So hopefully he'll help us get better facilities. I don't know how much longer it held. By that time, I might be gone anyway, man. I ain't gonna last forever there, but I'm certainly having fun with it right now. But I just had to tell you that I'm excited about what Western has, and we'll see. Because I asked the coach. They're tall, but can they play? What can they do, man? What can they do? And he says he's very excited about it. So we'll see.
We'll have to effort Mike Dominguez from New Mexico Highlands to come on again too, and maybe we can do like a college preview of all the teams, maybe some women's teams too. I think it's deserving that we cover just different parts of the state, and now that we have a connection down south, and Nick Capola, I think he's going to be doing some basketball stuff for New Mexico State too. There's Lobo Aggie fans kind of spread throughout the state, so I think just by us covering it from a fan objective perspective, I think is due. Mackenzie, I'm not sure if you caught social media, probably saw just what some of the guys have been posting. There's new uniforms, and there's definitely more of a turquoise feature in the uniforms this year. Wanted to get your opinion on those.
I'm ashamed. I haven't seen it.
What?
I've been inundated. My Twitter feed is feeding me the wrong information, I guess. But
All
I love
the,
it. I think
the geo
embracing the
manufacturing.
turquoise in our uniforms is uniquely New Mexican, and I love seeing it on every uniform, not just on the special uniforms. So maybe you can tease it with a screenshot. I'd love to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I'll do it. They got the New Mexico all the way across the chest, and there's teal in the collar. There's teal down the sides. There's teal around each letter. They look good, man. They look good. It's a nice change from just having Lobos. I like the New Mexico on the chest.
Coach Patino better watch out. He's starting to get a little New Mexican on us, you know?
It's having too much green chili. But any updates from your end, Mackenzie, on 505 basketball season approaching? Not sure if you guys are going to have any sort of special events, fundraising opportunities.
So we're working on trying to get a private practice for Catalyst donors for 505. So that's folks that are north of $3,000 a year, to try to get them a sneak peek if they haven't already had an opportunity to see the team practice leading up to the exhibition. No firm dates yet or commitments. It's kind of hard to get all this stuff done right at the last little bit, but we'll definitely get one early in the season for sure. Lobos got a tough schedule out of the gauntlet right out of the gate. They got to definitely make sure that they're ready to go. Fortunately, it seems like everybody's healthy, which is really good, really important at this time of year. Just your typical bumps and bruises. They've spent a ton of time working on strength conditioning and really making sure not only that they're stronger and tougher from just a performance standpoint, but I think just tougher. Because I think the last couple of years we've really struggled when we start getting in February and March. We wear down. So I think a big point of emphasis this year has been in the off season with strength and conditioning has been just endurance and durability and things like that will really help us as we go down the wire late in the season when things get really tough, and we've really kind of fallen off the last 2 years. So I know that was a big point of emphasis for the staff going into the year. Yeah, we have a crazy roster this year. It's really hard to know who's going to start. I think 3 or 4 of the positions are pretty well set, but I don't necessarily know that who starts is going to be that important. We're really strong 1 through 8 or 9, and we have a couple really interesting dudes, in that 9 through 12 range that I think can really move the needle quite a bit. I think the biggest question is where's the scoring going to come from this year? I think rebounding is going to be fine. I think defense is going to be pretty good, if not really good, especially compared to the last couple of years. It's all going to be about scoring and where that comes from. And I think they'll be running a lot more sets than they have in the past. I know last year we kind of depended on Jamal and Jalen to kind of create offense on their own. And I think this year they're going to probably rely a little bit more on more structure from an offensive standpoint. But we have really good players for that. We have a lot of length, and if we're making shots, we're going to be really hard to beat. If we're not making shots, I think we could probably win some games in the 60s, which I think we've struggled to do in the last couple of years. So they have all the makings to be a really strong team. I know the rankings have come out. I don't think the first Ken Palms have come out, but there was another ranking system that I saw that had the Lobos at number 52 preseason overall nationally, which was number 1 in the Mountain West. I think that's underselling the Mountain West a little bit, and I think the Lobos are better than they were last year for sure. And I think last year's Lobos probably ended around 30, 35. So, I do think that we're better than our rankings suggest, but we're going to get tested early, and we'll see how we perform.
What do you think about the shooting? I know you talked specifically about scoring. I know that we got some guys on the team that are really good at slashing, right? Donovan Dent. I think Chu's a really good slasher, and we're looking for him to kind of take that next step, the same type of step that Dent took from his freshman year into his sophomore year. But from a shooting perspective, guys kind of threats on the perimeter. I was at that open practice. CJ Nolan looked like one of those guys that can basically score on all 3 levels. Mm-hmm. He kind of reminds me of Darius Gary a little bit with that same type of body type. A little
taller, but yeah.
Yeah, but he was knocking down some shots, and catch and shoot looked like the jumper looked real good. But What are your thoughts around shooting ability? Because it's something that the Lobos didn't really have a strong emphasis on last year. It was kind of one of their weakest part of the game.
Yeah, I think if we look down the roster, I think CJ is going to be leaned on pretty heavily. We're going to need him to shoot well from the outside. I do think that you're going to find Donovan has really worked on his shot quite a bit. I don't think that he's going to be a jump shot first guy. I think he's going to still have his game. But I think, where last year they would play off him 3-4 feet and he was reluctant to shoot. I do think that there's going to be some games where he may hit 2 or 3 threes just to keep guys honest, which makes him even harder to defend. Looking for a big bounce back year from Braden. I know he dealt with a lot of stuff the last 2 years, both physically with his thumb, and then also, obviously all the headlines off the court with some of the stuff he was dealing with from a mental health standpoint. I know he's back, locked and loaded, really good. And if you watch him in practice, he's still got a sweet shot. And I think they're gonna run some sets for him for sure for some corner threes. I would expect to see him get 3-4 opportunities a game for sure. More if he's hot, they'll leave him in there as a hot hand. He's still a big, long body. He's worked a lot on his quickness so that he's not, that he's able to keep up from a defensive standpoint. But then I also think we're going to get shooting. We have some other guys, with more size that can also shoot. I think Mustafa, if we can get, good production from him. Jovan has demonstrated in practice that he can make outside shots pretty efficiently. So I think those two guys from the 4 spot could be big contributors, chip in a handful of threes or stretch out the defense a little bit to give Nelly some room to work. And then, I think Philip is kind of my X factor going into the year. A lot of people, they're being pretty tight-lipped about him. And I think that's rightfully so, because I think he could be newcomer of the year in the Mountain West. I think he's that good.
Wow. Okay. That's some high praise.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm really, yeah, not like we have 125 people watching right now. It's fine.
That's sort of a quick point if I could. Last year, Donovan, you're right. He's a slasher. He's not going to, he's probably improved that outside shooting. But he's he likes to drive the hole, penetrate, and man, his drives to the basket and getting to the rim and finishing that one shot against New Mexico State was one of the most amazing shots I think I'd seen. Maybe, yeah, they played that in the Sports Center over and over. But real quick point about Braden, and I like him a lot. I do. He can shoot. There's no doubt about it. But look, you can, and this, man, Mackenzie, this. You can work on quickness. That's true. But, he is somewhat of a defensive liability because he doesn't have that natural foot speed. But I think you're right. Situational guy, bring him in, run him off some picks, catch and shoot, bam. I saw that last summer and last June when I was watching practice. I thought, God, he's got a nice stroke, right? And, you mentioned the physical and mental issues he went with, and I think he's ready for a bounce-back year. But defensively, it's hard to really put him in for a long time because he does not – you spread him out, he doesn't have that foot speed. And you either have that quickness, you can work on it, but if you don't have that natural foot speed, it's hard. But I think you're right. There's going to be some chances for him to come in and, shoot, man. We need shooters, need people to put the ball in the basket. And I think you're right. Where's that scoring coming from? We knew where it's coming from last year. You could throw the ball in there to JT, and he's going to get you some. I think Nelly, not having that, a visa problem, got here late last year. He's ready to go. He's probably going to be a little bit better than we think, man. Maybe you mentioned they don't want to talk about Philip too much, and they already know about Nelly, but he's here. He's been here. He's ready to go. And it took him, 2 months last year, a month and a half, to really get acclimated to the altitude here, to a lot of stuff. And, we saw some good stuff from him. I think we'll see even better things from Nelly this year. I really do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Nelly is at a completely different spot this year compared to last year. I think this time last year he wasn't even here. So, that tells you all you need to know. But yes, he's in great shape and playing like a man. Finishing touch is a lot better. I think that's the first thing that goes when you're out and when you're not able to work out is just touch around the basket. And I think Nelly struggled with that for half the season. So I do expect him to be offensively better. But going back to Braden, you're 100% right from a inherent perspective for him, like from a quickness perspective. But you have to also understand that from a team defensive standpoint, we were undersized, and we definitely had some players that weren't what I'll call defense first on the perimeter the last couple of years. So, I do think that just the supporting cast, the additional length, the additional physicality that we have at the other positions will allow I think we'd probably call Braden a specialist, will create an environment where a specialist can be a little bit more effective and not be quite so exposed. I think our added size at every position will allow a guy like Braden to come in and, maybe his minutes, maybe he's only playing 5-6 minutes, but coach is able to manage defense, offense, work possessions and get him as many offensive possessions as possible to get him 3 or 4 good looks, because, 3 or 4 threes extra per game could be the difference between us winning 26 games and winning 19 games. It really could come down to that. So I think, they have a lot of tools in the toolbox, and I know that the coaching staff, they have a group that I think is incredibly bought in, especially at this point in the game. They've all been together. They were here all summer. No one missed workouts. No one was, last year, I mean, I love him. God bless Mash, but Mash didn't work out. He wasn't here all summer. He was in Miami and doing his own workouts with his own trainers. And it's just really hard to build team chemistry. And I would just say, these guys have been here all summer. They're dialed in. Donovan has stepped up in a big way to be that guy who, sets the tone for the culture of the team. And I really feel like, they're vibing in a great way. So definitely looking forward to it. They're going to have some adversity early. So we're going to find out real quick how strong that culture truly is. Hopefully they experience some success so that they can overcome the downsides. But I think it's been a long time since we've had a team picked top 2 in the Mountain West, and we could be leaving non-conference play with 4 or 5 losses, and that would be a success. So
just one quick point to that. Well, Coach Pitino's goals in the offseason: get longer, more athletic, check. Beef up that schedule, make it more stronger conference schedule. And this conference, the non-conference, might be the strongest one I've seen in a lot. And I've been a fan since '70. I can't remember seeing a stronger non-conference schedule. And they're going to be tested, as you mentioned, quickly. And so I think it's great. I really do. We mentioned some of the other teams in the conference being tested early. Boise State last year was tested early. So I think for New Mexico, remember, this was, I told you, back in the day, you couldn't get Louisville and Danny Crum to come here. What was in it for them, man? The altitude, they're not going to come here. So I think, New Mexico getting that schedule is huge. Coach Pitino getting longer, more athletic. That's what he said. The guards, we got exposed against Clemson and exposed badly on the perimeter. Yeah, we did. So I think you mentioned the length. They're much longer. Philip, Jovan, bringing them in. The kid from BYU, he's going to help. He's a shot blocker. He's got some size. So I think from that standpoint there, Coach Pitino's goals in the offseason have been met. Now, can they put it together on the floor? That's the next step. And I'm excited, man. I can't wait to see him. I can't wait. I really can't.
And I think the key to all of it that you just mentioned, Mackenzie, was the off-season stuff and building the team chemistry, because I think you really kind of build some level of trust and friendship with these guys. And it's almost more important what happens off the court than kind of what happens on the court. And you got to remember, these guys are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and a lot can be built in just one off season. And some of the players that you were mentioning are really exciting to hear about, right? I think Philip, you making the comment, and I'm going to hold it to you. I'm going to bring it up by mid-season, and it's going to be like, Mackenzie, we told you so, right? October 9th. But one guy that I kind of circled my interest around was Jovan, because he comes in listed at 6'10". I don't know if he's a true 6'10", but he's a big 6'10", and he stretches the floor. And the way that he plays the game is unlike a traditional 6'10" player. He shoots it from the outside. He likes to bring the ball up. He likes the ball in his hand, and he's constantly finding guys who were open on the floor. So he's a really good passer. He's got great vision, and it's something that you don't see with the player his size and his unique skill set. He handles the ball really well for being that size too. So I think that can create some really bad matchups for a lot of teams that have to put someone on him and guard him. It opens up the floor, right? And it kind of opens more to what Donovan Dent's skill set was, which is the high pick and screen, right? The high pick and roll, where we saw him flourish last year. And there's some other guys that are going to come in. And if that pick and roll was developed over this summer and they're just kind of gelling and finding good passing windows and just kind of reading off of each other, man, if you think this team's going to be better than last year, I'm looking for them to kind of come out of the gates fast and not look like they looked against St. Mary's last year in the second game of the season, where they were just like all brand new to each other. You could just kind of get that vibe from them. I kind of imagine this team would be a little more put together and prepared for that type of moment earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be realistic, right? Like, you can't lose a guy like JT Toppin and Jamal Mashburn and Jalen House with their elite offensive skill set and not lose something, right? Like, we're not going to probably score 100 points a game very often. We probably won't score in the 90s very often. We're going to probably play a lot more games in the, high 60s, 70s, and low 80s. That's going to be our sweet spot. But, Patino's offense, he loves to run 4 trailing with that guy in a high screen and roll, and Donovan Dent's the best there is in the business at running that offense. And I do think Joe Vaughn and Donovan are going to be involved in a lot of high pick and roll action for sure. I don't think that goes without saying. I do think he's going to be, because we have so much more size, I think, Donovan's going to be able to run that action with a bunch of guys. But I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how the roles get defined and how playing time, delves out, because it really is like, I think even if you ask the coaching staff, and I think this is an honest answer, is we don't really know yet how guys are going to respond to, the bright lights and to, when the games matter. And we're going to find out in the first 2 or 3 games, and probably 5 or 6 games, what certain guys are made of and who's part of that main rotation. But I do think Joe Vaughn is a pretty special player. I think people that haven't had a chance to see him, it's like, oh, he's a freshman. I'm like, this is not your typical freshman.
Does not look like a freshman.
He is.
Take a look at
the team. He's lost 20 pounds, and he's still like the biggest guy on the team. I mean, he is just an absolute Mack truck. I don't know what they feed him in Serbia for guys to look like he looks, but and then in Phoenix last year. But he's a remarkable player. Super excited about him. Again, another dude that we got to be tight-lipped on, but could totally be in the running for freshman of the year if all things go according to plan. He's a hell of a player. I'm excited about him. Do think Cade Dodson, backup guard. I think he'll be a big rotation guy in those 1 and 2 spots, especially if like Donovan gets in foul trouble or CJ gets in foul trouble. I could see him playing a lot of minutes. And he's been working hard, ton of extra reps, shooting a ton, understands the role he needs to fill on the team, and I think is buying into that. So, the cool thing is just how much those guys are working outside of practice. You get there early to watch them practice, and you got 6 dudes out there just shooting on their own, and trainer and the managers and the assistant coaches are out there because these guys just want to get reps. They just love being in the gym and they just love playing. So, that kind of work ethic is really good as a foundation to build on. And hopefully, it's all going to be interesting. The first right hook we take from somebody, and how we battle back, and we're going to find out the resilience of this team, just like every team. You never know until adversity hits what kind of squad we have.
Well, I think we're going to end on that note, Mackenzie. I think we're going to preview the team. I think we want to preview the women's team in separate live streams, but we want to kind of do a full in-depth analysis for as much as we can find out and what we got from kind of some insiders like you. But again, I want to thank you for coming on the live stream, chalking it up with us. NCAA, portal, NIL, Lobo football, Lobo basketball. He is a Brazo Mac. Mackenzie Bishop, also with 505 Sports Venture Foundation. Again, thank you, man. We'll have you on the show anytime. Always enjoy conversation. I think you're very well kind of plugged in enough to know what's going on, and just always appreciate your thoughts and comments on everything.
Humble to be here, guys. I really appreciate the time, and it's awesome to talk Lobo sports, especially in October.
Yep. Lobo football on Saturday, 5:00 against Air Force. Hopefully they can get out of there with a dub, 2 games in a row. And then Lobo basketball, we're literally a little less than a month out. Hopefully we get a good turnout for that UTEP scrimmage. Get your first look. There's not going to be a Lobo howl or anything, right? Because I think Kurt was shooting for something like that, and it just never came to fruition. But
yeah, I think we've talked about that in the past. It's really hard to put together. Those events end up costing us a lot more than they actually end up making. And I think that the exhibition with UTEP is a great, kind of secondary option. But every minute those guys can spend in the gym, under wraps working on installing sets and the offense and things like that is time that's precious for those guys. So no howl this year. Not sure if it'll come back or not. Maybe, but yeah, not this year.
Okay. Well, we'll do our best to cover both women's and men's basketball. Preview both teams. We'll be live again Saturday morning, 9 a.m. for the Lobo Howl live pregame show covering Lobo football and any recent news that's come up. Maybe talk about some Thursday and Friday high school games, which is more Ed and Nick's world. But for everyone watching, appreciate your time. Thanks for tuning in. We'll continue to bring the latest and greatest that we know about UNM sports and everything that's a part of it. So thanks for watching. You guys have a good evening, and we will chat soon.